Jesse is here. Jess, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do it.
All right. Ryan heads off into the sunsets, and we get a little rapid fire action going here. Fill in the blank. Marcus Freeman holds his first spring press conference this Thursday after Notre Dame's first spring practice. It will be blank if Freeman says there's a quarterback competition this spring.
It'll be unnecessary because everyone knows that there's no quarterback competition this spring. And I hate when coaches do this. You went into the portal for a reason, got what was arguably the best quarterback in the portal to transfer to your school. That guy is going to start. There is no question about it. It is unnecessary. And I think it creates a lot of drama and media headlines for a week or two, gives people something to talk about. But we all know the answer. Everyone in the chat would be, oh, do we really think that Riley Leonard isn't going to start? And it's like, no, he's going to start. It creates a lot of chaos and lack of confidence for no reason.
That's right. It's there. There is no universe barring injury, which obviously Riley Leonard came to Notre Dame with, but he is fine right now, by the way. And I've seen this kind of floating around here recently. There was some bogus report about Riley Leonard not being able to practice this spring. He will be practicing, according to the IB sources. He is 100%. He's going to be out there, and he is going to be practicing. As Vince and I were talking about the other day, he was at the women's basketball game, throwing prizes and stuff up into the stands a few days ago. Granted, it's not football, but he was walking just fine. There's no reason, to believe that he's not going to be out there practicing. But, little sidebar. You went out just like you got Sam Hartman last year. You got Riley Leonard to be the starting quarterback. The only quarterback competition there is going to be is for who's going to be the second string guy. Is it going to be Steve Angeli, who had a nice bowl game, or is it going to be Kenny Minchie, who has limited reps? And then no matter what, CJ Carr is sort of everyone's understudy, sort of learning and growing and all that kind of stuff this spring, just sort of dabbling and getting his feet wet. That's the only competition. It's for who's going to be the number two guy. That's it. There's no Steve Angeli, Riley Leonard competition. Riley Leonard is here again, just like Sam Hartman was last year, to be the starting quarterback. If Marcus Freeman wants to say, hey, we want him competing and get the best, competition brings out the best in everybody. Okay. But, it is what it is, right? We know that Riley Leonard was brought here to be the guy. So with spring practice getting ready to start, let's look at the offense a little bit today. Give me two players at the top of your list to be breakout players from Notre Dame's offense this spring.
So when I saw this question, I think you need to give me what your definition of breakout player. Someone who hasn't gotten playing time yet, someone who had playing time but might have a bigger role, someone who completely was off the field but is now going to be on the field.
Fair.
I just need a little bit of context for break. I don't want people freaking reaming me about what my breakout players, because I just need to know what our guidelines are here.
I'll give you an example, because I think offense is a little bit tougher, just because you do have a pretty good core of guys who have all started before. Riley Leonard cannot be a breakout player, for example. He broke out at Duke. Obviously, he hasn't done it at Notre Dame yet, but he is an established starting quarterback, and again, brought here not to compete for a job, but to be the guy for the job.
Now, I guess, would you get mad at me if I picked Faison and you would say, well, Faison won MVP of the bowl game? You know what I mean?
I think he's broken out. I don't think you can pick Faison sort of for that reason. I think that was kind of his breakout already.
Okay.
My top pick is Eli Raridon, for example, because Eli Raridon has played, but he also had a knee injury, and then he came back a little bit last year. And again, while he played, he didn't elevate to the point where he's the guy at tight end. And with Mitchell Evans out this spring because of his own unfortunate injury, I see Eli Raridon, again, even though he's played the last couple of years, I see this as an opportunity for Eli Raridon to really elevate himself and establish himself and become the guy. So like that's the kind of guy that I'm looking at.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's funny. I looked at the tight end group, but I was like, you know what? I bet he's gonna do that one. So I left the tight ends
Good call. Good call.
alone. I'm gonna go first with Jeremiyah Love, and I
Okay.
think he's going to be in a room that has a lot of talent. Last season was Audric Estime and the gang. This season it's going to be Jeremiyah Love and the gang, right? Like Jeremiyah Love split carries with Jabron Payne. He also split carries with Jadarian Price. I think he's going to be the main workhorse this season, and we got a little sprinkle of Jeremiyah Love and his his quickness and his quick cuts last season. I think you're going to see even more this season. He's going to be a 1,000-yard rusher for Notre Dame in this offense.
I like that one, and he's kind of someone I thought about. But you're exactly right, because he was the number 3 running back basically all of last year. Like maybe not all of last year,
2 or 3, you could say.
Yeah, 2-3 in that range basically. Because you did have Jadarian Price in there, and it was kind of a sort of a 2A 2B maybe behind.
I think it was more so game plan, like what they were looking to accomplish in that specific game plan.
But Love, I would put him in the same category that I just put Eli Raridon in. He's played, but now with Audric Estime gone, he's really got a chance to sort of insert himself into a higher echelon in the pecking order this spring.
Okay.
Hasn't truly broken out yet. So I like that. I considered him, but I like that. I like where your head's at.
I could go 2 ways for this next one, so I think you should go next again.
Okay.
Because I don't want to take someone of yours.
See, and again, this was a little bit of a struggle for me, just because of, one, you've got some established wide receivers coming in via the transfer portal. So I don't think we can count them,
right.
The guy from Florida International comes in. He just had 1,000-yard season, so he's not a breakout player.
Yeah, Mitchell and Collins. I don't think you can. The Clemson and the Florida guy.
Exactly. So those guys are eliminated. I'm really looking at the offensive line because, again, Vince and I touched on this a little bit the other day. They had a nice bowl game, but that's one game, and they're a group of reserves that was going against a group of reserves. And really, I think when you look across the board, you're looking at a bunch of guys who haven't truly had what you would call, like a breakout, like a truly established themselves. And the fact that they're replacing both tackle spots, maybe this is just too easy. I'm going to go with Charles Jagusah because he ended up being the left tackle, but I don't think that he's necessarily just going to be handed the job. If he, again, he hasn't truly broken out because he's barely played, can we consider pre-bowl practice a breakout for him? I don't think so. So I think that we're going to see Charles Jagusah really sort of firmly establish himself as one of the pillars of the offensive line this spring, and then really kind of rolling into next fall training camp as well. So I'm maybe I'm cheating a little bit. I don't know, but I can't consider one game and a handful of pre-bowl practices the true breakout. So I'm going with Jagusah.
Yeah, so Jagusah was one of mine, and so that's why I came prepared with another one, a backup option just in case. But to sum up what you were saying, why I would be comfortable picking Jagusah is I think that Notre Dame right now doesn't have the dude on their offensive line. There's no Joe Alt, Ronnie Stanley, McGlinchey, Zach Martin. Go down the list. There's not a current dude on the offensive line, and I think that's Jagusah. I think he's the next dude on the offensive line that's going to take over and be dominant. And I don't think the rest of the guys are necessarily going to be bad. They're just not going to be a top 10 draft pick like Charles Jagusah will eventually be in 3 to 4 seasons. And so I think that's why the basis of why I would say he is going to be the breakout guy, because he is going to break out and be the next superstar offensive lineman from Notre Dame. And so that's kind of how I looked at him. And then the other one I looked at was the wide receiver room. And this guy, while he had some early success last season, I would say that he kind of tapered off, had a couple injury issues throughout the middle of the season. So I would go with Jaden Greathouse because I think that he still needs that consistent, I'm here and I'm here to stay type season. I don't need him to be 1,000 yards, but I need probably at least 600 and probably at least 6 touchdowns to go along with it to kind of have a true breakout season. And I know, again, he had a couple good games early on last season, but he wasn't consistent. He wasn't that consistent wide receiver throughout the duration of the season. And whether or not that was controlled by him, injuries, whatever else, it doesn't matter. I still think he has that breakout potential left in him.
And and again, like when you look at Faison, you almost could have said, well, maybe Louisville with that, that touchdown catch that he had was his breakout, because there wasn't a ton of production from Faison even after that Louisville game. But obviously, when you get MVP of the bowl game or offensive MVP of the bowl game, I think that, that sort of crosses him off the list in terms of like that. He's definitely broken out at this point. He finished more on an upward swing. And again, I kind of went back and forth on Greathouse, but I think you make great points. He was there, he played, but you didn't have that true sort of, kind of moment. Unfortunately, Faison was one of the few receivers who really kind of had that last year. So I think while just what you said, while Greathouse has played, I think the breakout is still there for him. And I think he's got a great opportunity to do that this spring, just like all these receivers, basically.
Yeah.
All right. So we had some news just before we got started here this afternoon, a little bit before the show started today. Notre Dame freshman point guard Hannah Hidalgo, no shock, ACC Rookie of the Year. She basically won that going away. She also ended up on the All-ACC first team and was also named the ACC's Defensive Player of the Year after leading the nation with nearly 5 steals per game. She is just the second player in ACC history and the first in 12 years to get both Rookie of the Year, and Defensive Player of the Year in the same year. So what do you think about Hannah Hidalgo and her ACC hardware that she's taken home today, Jess?
Yeah, I think that her ACC hardware as a freshman is tremendous. And I think that the accumulation of the hardware should have won her ACC Player of the Year. She essentially won ACC Defensive Player of the Year and averaged more points than the ACC Player of the Year, but somehow got third place in the final standings for the ACC Player of the Year. No, seriously, like what is your argument for Kitley that she has more rebounds than Hannah Hidalgo? Well, rebounding is a part of defense majority, and again, Hannah Hidalgo led the nation in steals, which is defense that leads to offense, and then also was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year while averaging more points in ACC contests. So I really don't understand. I think they wanted to continue this legacy of giving it to someone for 3 years in a row rather than putting aside that this girl is a freshman and is probably going to have her time down the road, and it's just really annoying at the end of the day.
This is all Vince and I were talking about this yesterday. We were talking about Hidalgo's chances for Player of the Year, and that's basically the case that I made, even though I voted for her at the top of my ballot. We had to rank 1 through 20 on the ballot. I had Hidalgo first. I actually had Deasia Fair, who finished second, and I put Elizabeth Kitley third, because when you look at Syracuse was picked to finish 9th, and their head coach, Felicia Leggett-Jack, ended up being Coach of the Year. They ended up being the 3 seed at the ACC tournament this week. And I think that because of how low Syracuse was picked to finish, how high they ended up, that's essentially what got Leggett-Jack the Coach of the Year over Kenny Brooks, who led Virginia Tech to its first ACC championship. He ended up second, fairly distant second, actually. But I think that basically what you spelled out, the fact that, 1, Kitley has reputation, 2, she averaged a double-double again, and that, that means a lot to people, and Virginia Tech ended up winning the conference. This is her last year, and then what you said there at the end, I think that people were going to look at Hidalgo and say, well, she's a freshman, she's going to have more opportunities to do this, so she didn't get the votes. As it turned out, second and third were very close. Kitley got 1,603 votes, Deasia Fair from Syracuse got 1,463, and Hidalgo was just 2 points behind her, 1,461 in third place, which means if you're in the top 10 in the voting, you are first team ACC. So she ends up third behind those two, and both of the other two are grad students, so they'll both be gone after this year. And they ended up first and second, Kitley and Fair, and Hidalgo ends up third, just missing out on even second place by 2 points in the voting.
But honestly, like in your, I know how you voted. So like, don't you honestly believe though that 5 steals a game outweighs 11 rebounds a game, and you add on that they were still Hidalgo was still the defensive player of the year, like
exactly, and not just the numbers, but like the fact she led the entire nation with those steals. It's not just that she had a fair amount of steals. She led the entire nation with those steals. She led the ACC in scoring over Kitley, obviously over everybody.
Right.
And she's third in the nation in scoring. By the way, Caitlin Clark, who's leading everybody, obviously.
Of all time.
Yeah. So like if you throw, Clark out, just because of like if you're doing a fantasy draft, it would obviously be, Caitlin Clark in her own tier. And then, you would have the next tier, you'd have a handful of players. But she's third in the nation in scoring. She leads the nation in steals. It's not that, just that she put up, like some arbitrary sort of random numbers. Kitley has been a very good player. But, again, look at what Notre Dame did to her when it mattered last week. Yeah, she had one of her worst games of the season and did not have a double-double.
And got out-rebounded by Hannah Hidalgo. That's what I just don't get how you could say that the ACC's best offensive player and the ACC's best defensive player is not the player of the year. It's just kind of incredible to say in the same sentence.
No, I know. So, I mean, it's still an incredible year. It's obviously nothing to sneeze at. The fact that she's rookie of the year and
but nothing is guaranteed. There's nothing guaranteeing that next season,
you're right.
Injuries, whatever could potentially happen down the road. Like you can't not give it to someone now just because of where they're at in their career compared to other people, and that's the frustrating part. You have to. It's one of my most annoying things in sports. Is no matter.
You just cut out. No, you're still on mute.
I think I'm back now.
There you are. Yes.
Everyone wants to treat the younger players differently than the older players. It doesn't matter. It's all classless. You're all a pool of players playing together in a specific, conference, whatever it might be. And so I just hate when you get these, I wish they'd almost, I know you can't, but just drop the labels of class because it gets people's minds to think in certain ways. And it's very frustrating.
No, I know. You're absolutely right. And it's still like this in the women's game because women stay 4 and 5 years. I mean, look at Kitley. She's a 5th-year player. And Deasia Fair, 5th-year player. Whereas in the men's game, obviously, guys are gone a lot quicker. So what year you happen to be in school doesn't mean nearly as much, I don't think, on the men's side, specific to women, men's and women's basketball. It doesn't mean nearly as much on the men's side as it does on the women's side because of that perspective that you're talking about. And that's, I mean, I said yesterday, this is how I would vote. I've got Hidalgo at the top. I've been fortunate to see every game, but I also got to see some of those key head-to-head matchups. And, look at the fact that she also had 24 games scoring 20-plus points this season. It's the second most in an ACC season ever. Again, if you want to say it's by a freshman, but the only one who did that more times was Arike Agumbawale in her last season at Notre Dame, 2018-2019. 24 games of 20-plus points by a true freshman walking in the door. Yet, that was not good enough for the voters. People voted, so there's nothing you can do. It's not like, someone sat in a room and just decided this is the player of the year and, whatever. People turned in their ballots for it. I don't know how seriously they take it because, I think it's also pretty much a sham that Maddie Westbeld, who almost averaged a double-double herself, and Sonia Citron, who, is one of the one of the best players. They're both, for this season, two of the best players in the conference. They got second team All ACC. So, and a couple of the players that ended up in front of them, like if you compare stats, compare where their teams are, and everything else, I don't think that it was really much of a match. But congratulations to all of them. Citron and Westbeld both very deserving as well. Hannah Hidalgo obviously deserving of what she got. I also voted Kylie Watson to the all-defensive team. Unfortunately, she didn't make it, on that all-defensive team, even though she's fourth in the conference in block shots this year, which, like, what are you looking for in
Yeah.
defensive presence? Did you watch the Virginia Tech game? Now, Maddie Westbeld contributed to that as well, but I don't know. But that's part of the thing is obviously, if you cover a team, you see every game that team plays. If and you're only going to see a couple, like a handful of games of the rest of the, players in the conference. So a lot of it also kind of depends on what you see from those specific players in that game that you happen to see. But if you watched the Notre Dame game this year and you watched the ACC, you obviously saw what Hannah Hidalgo can do. But you also saw what Citron and Westbeld can do game in and game out. Again, I felt like and my ballot showed it, they should have been higher. They should have been first team players, I thought. So I guess that's just me. All right, I got to find my sheet now here, Jess, for the next question. I believe it's a Russell Wilson question,
Yes.
right? So the Broncos have released Russell Wilson. Do you buy or sell him as a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I go back and forth with this because
I don't. But go ahead.
Like, he was AP Offensive Player of the Year 4 times. He was a 9-time Pro Bowler. He won a Super Bowl. He's up there in a lot of, passing stats. He came in and really was kind of, in my opinion, not the forefront, but he kind of restarted the mobile quarterback trends in the NFL. I think he was kind of on the cusp of, like, it felt like the NFL for a while there went from, straight drop back pass type off quarterbacks like Tom Brady, basically. And it felt like Russell Wilson kind of led that era of more mobile quarterbacks, right? Like guys who can do more with their legs, etc. It's right on the brink, but I think I would lean yes as of now.
Interesting.
But I don't know. It's really hard. Like he's had the consistency. Like every year he plays, since he's come into the league, he hasn't missed many games. Like he's maybe missed a game or two in a couple seasons. Like he's extremely durable. The only thing that I have hesitancy about is in the equation of, and you could say this about a lot of different, I think, quarterback and head coaches, but how much do you give to Pete Carroll and how much do you give to Russell Wilson? And again, when Tom Brady was in New England, he also had really good defenses, and so did Russell Wilson.
Right.
When they were really good, it was a Legion of Boom. Like they had really good defenses, and that is, I don't know. And he basically should have won a second Super Bowl. I know you can't count it, but I mean, he should have won that second Super Bowl in my opinion as well. So I barely lean yes right now.
I lean no. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. I know he's won a Super Bowl, and that's the biggest thing that works in his favor. And as you said, close to another one, but he did throw an interception at the goal line that cost him the game. There's obviously an argument that they should have just handed off to Marshawn Lynch. That's out there, and maybe that changes the dynamic. But that's the biggest check in Russell Wilson's box, I think. You talked about consistency, and for a long time he was. And there was the argument, like, is Pete Carroll holding him back? Does he let Russell Wilson cook enough? And a lot of times it took until the end of the game when maybe they were losing sometimes before he would kind of start letting him. But here's a list of other guys who have won Super Bowls not in the Hall of Fame. Jim Plunkett won 2 with the Raiders. You got Phil Simms, Jim McMahon, Joe Theismann, Jeff Hostetler, Mark Rippon, Trent Dilfer, Brett Johnson. Nick Foles still playing. I guess technically he's still playing anyway, but he'll never be in the Hall of Fame. So again, to me, that's the biggest thing in Wilson's favor. He's got nice stats. He's obviously declined over the last couple of years. He's been to the Pro Bowl 9 times. He's never been first team All Pro. He's been second team All Pro just once. He's never won an MVP. He had a 6-year stretch where I think he peaked, where he was really good. But to me, he's just never been, maybe some of it was because of Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and guys like that. He obviously was playing in an era where you did have a couple guys who are going to be in the Hall of Fame and some others as well. But I just feel like Russell Wilson is really good, but I do think that a lot of that success that you're talking about had just as much to do with the defenses that Seattle had as it did with Russell Wilson. So I vote no to Russell Wilson's case for the Hall of Fame as of right now. Now, if he can actually do what he says he wants to do and get some team and into the Super Bowl and win a couple games, okay. But I don't think so right now.
I was just reading something here. Russell Wilson has received 0 votes in his 11 NFL seasons for MVP.
There you go.
I know it was tough because you have Brady and Matt Ryan and probably
Rodgers.
A little bit of Peyton Manning towards the beginning and
right.
And Rodgers and Phillip Rivers as well was around when he was there. Like
Patrick Mahomes at the same
Patrick
time.
Mahomes. And so I don't know if we're getting caught up of, was Russell Wilson just actually above average for a generation that had really good quarterbacks? Or was he just a guy that was actually pretty good, stuck amongst elite quarterbacks? I don't know, but I mean, if you say Matt Ryan doesn't get in, then why does Russell Wilson deserve to get in? Because the only thing Russell Wilson has over him is the Super Bowl, but Matt Ryan has an MVP.
Yeah.
And Matt Ryan went to a Super Bowl and had a 28-3 lead. I don't know how much you can blame him for a 28-3 collapse type situation. And again, that goes back to Pete Carroll. Was Russ just fortunate to have a better head coach in the Super Bowl, right? And so I'm really much on the fence, and I could depending on the day probably teeter back and forth. But after seeing that no MVP thing, I almost want to lean towards no now.
Yeah. He's very good.
This isn't to say that he's bad, but I mean the Hall of Fame again is the best of the best.
Yeah. I just don't think he's a Hall of Famer as of right now. I think that we should have seen more from him in Denver the last couple of years. If he was
truly great and how much money he got, I think he should have been able to do more things, and Denver shouldn't be in this bad of shape.
Joe Montana had less physically in his body left when he went from San Francisco to Kansas City for a few years in the early 90s than what Russell Wilson has right now. Physically, Russell Wilson has more than what Joe had left at that point. And Joe did a lot more. He got the Chiefs into the playoffs and won playoff games. And it's the opposite with Russell Wilson. So I got to go no. My question then, follow-up, would you want Wilson as your quarterback now?
No.
Much easier answer.
No.
6 years ago, I would have said yes.
Same.
But
that was also he would have been 28-29 during that time.
Right.
Not
exactly.
35 going on 36.
Yeah. I went through, I would not want him. I could see the Vikings potentially if if they don't bring Kirk Cousins back, maybe Atlanta if they don't trade for Justin Fields, Washington, New England, maybe for a year because you're going to get him for a relatively low price. If they draft quarterbacks and they just want a veteran in front of him and not throw the rookie into the fire. But I just don't see a lot of situations that would make sense, where I would want Russell Wilson as opposed to whatever the other options are at quarterback. I would almost, if I was a team that is bringing in, is going to have a young quarterback, I would almost rather just have that and get a better draft pick next year than bring in Russell Wilson for a year.
Yeah. Minnesota, I mean, I've heard Minnesota in connection to Trey Lance, I've heard Minnesota in connection to Russell Wilson. that, Kevin O'Connell, he's an interesting guy. I think that guy thinks he can put any quarterback out there and have success. After Kirk went down last year, it was just like quarterback after quarterback after quarterback, and it's like I just don't overall understand what the Vikings their direction is, because there's talks about letting Cousins go, Justin Jefferson go, and it's like you lose those two guys, you're basically just an average team.
Yep, that's absolutely right. That's right. So now that Philadelphia Eagles center Jason Kelce has retired, he's expected to land a TV job with either CBS, NBC, or ESPN. Would you rather see Kelce doing games out in the booth on Sunday or in the studio?
This was an easy one for me. I would easily say doing games, because that's more time spent with Jason Kelce. If you're in the studio, it's less airtime, and it's also muddled by like 5 or 6 other people taking your time in that limited window. So just because of exposure, I would want some Kelce. And I think he would be fun, but know when to be serious during like broadcasts as well. So I think I would go with broadcasts.
I agree. I absolutely, for the same reasons, because we've talked about, like, you get 4 to 6 guys in those pregame shows, and then each guy gets like 15 to 20 seconds to say something, and you got to keep it moving. I don't think that that's the best use of Jason Kelce, and I think he could bring a lot of personality to the booth. Like if CBS is willing to get rid of a couple that are old quarterbacks and bring in Jason Kelce and actually give him more airtime, more time to say things. Okay, that's maybe, that's not bad, but I think, just like you said, he needs room to shine. Like, I actually think the best use of him would be on a show like Good Morning Football on the NFL Network,
where he can have some more personality and have fun with it.
Yeah. Now, granted, they've already got 4 people, and again, like, are you just going to keep adding people to the to the booth? They've got Jason McCourty, the former defensive back, who's done a really good job over the last couple of years as like the full-time player there. But like, maybe if you built
you
like
just kick Kyle Brandt out, it's okay.
There you go. Your least favorite guy, Kyle Brandt, because he hits the Cowboys too hard all the time.
Oh, he hits the Cowboys for never winning, but FYI, 31 teams don't win in a season, Kyle Brandt.
That's right. That's true. But a lot of teams have won Super Bowl since the Cowboys last won a Super Bowl.
But not the 49ers.
Or even gone to the NFC Championship game. No, I don't, you're right. But I think the more airtime you can give Jason Kelce, the better.
Yes.
Basically. That's why I think the games would make the most sense for him rather than being in a studio show. So, at the same time, who are you most looking forward to hearing on TV next season? Tom Brady, Kelce, Bill Belichick, or Nick Saban?
I think there's 2 you could get rid of immediately. Tom Brady and Belichick. I've seen Brady before. I think he would come off as, I think his arrogance would shine through a little bit, whether he can help it or not. I think Bill, we'd want to see a different side of him, but I don't know how much he would actually give us, like unveil the curtain, I guess, type situation. Like, but to me, I would love to see Nick Saban, because I think he is obviously one of the most intellectual football minds there is. But I think a lot of people don't realize like how funny Nick Saban actually is. He's just so serious all the time because he's the head football coach of Alabama, the most winning team ever. And so he has to be. But like, Nick Saban is actually a very witty, sarcastic, funny guy. And you combine that with his football knowledge and that little Southern accent, calm Southern accent he's got going on. I would enjoy that as a football fan. I would have to go with Nick Saban, mainly because, again, I think we would see a side of Nick Saban that not a lot of people know is in there.
I agree. He's the one that I'm most curious, not most curious. He's the one I'm most looking forward to seeing because of the things that you're talking about. I think he's going to be a really good addition to game day. That's really the kind, that's what game day I think was lacking. Like that coach with, experience. He's got uber experience. He's got all the national championships, that gravitas. And I think that he will bring some personality. And as much as people hate on Pat McAfee, I think McAfee is going to probably help bring some of that out of him, because Saban, remember, was doing a weekly segment on McAfee's show this season on ESPN. And you saw some of that. He kind of, he still kind of kept it a little bit more reserved because he was still the head coach at Alabama and all that kind of stuff. But now that that's gone and he doesn't have, all those game plans to do and, narrow tunnel vision.
His money, baby.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I'm definitely most looking forward to seeing what he brings to game day. And I think it's going to be good. I am curious to see what Tom Brady is going to bring.
Yeah. Like I'm curious to see all of them in different ways, but I think Saban has the biggest upside to provide good content and good product, I guess is what I'm getting at.
From what I understand, Brady has been doing a lot of research, a lot of picking the brains of guys who have done the job and still doing the job that he's going to be doing as a game analyst. And he and Burkhardt, who he's going to be joining in the booth, Greg Olsen, they still haven't made an official announcement on what's happening with Greg Olsen, but it was Burkhardt and Olsen, but it's going to be Tom Brady sliding in there. Apparently, they've done some practice games together. They did some practice games together during the season, and I'm sure they'll continue to do more of that this offseason. That's what Tony Romo said he did in that first season leading up to his debut in the booth. I think he said he did like 50 or 60 practice games before he actually took the air. So I would think that I think that a big
games.
Yeah, I think that a part of the reason that Brady wanted to step aside, not step aside, but step back in that first year of retirement was to do what he's talking about, like to not just rush into it.
I mean, he's Tom Brady, right? Like,
yeah,
he wants
actually
to be great
do the work
at everything.
He wants to be great.
He knows how he prepared for football. That stuff carries over. You don't just walk into something and say, "Oh, I'm Tom Brady, I'll figure it out." He still has to do all the preparation, just like he was, as he was treating it like a game week, essentially.
Exactly.
Henry has joined us in the back there.
I see.
Hello.
That. He is very interested in Tom Brady, apparently. So. All right. Well, that's going to do it for today. Thanks for joining us on this edition of IB Nation Sports Talk and Rapid Fire. We will, let me see, Vince and Jesse will be with you tomorrow. Jesse and I will be back on Thursday, and then all three of us will be there. We'll be here on Friday after Notre Dame women's basketball's ACC opening game at the ACC tournament Friday morning. Bright and early, 11 a.m. tip-off Friday, and then we'll have the show, the Rapid Fire show, that afternoon. So hit the like button before you leave, and of course, subscribe, rate, and review. Jesse, I will talk to you again soon. We'll talk to you later on IB Nation Sports Talk.